Welcome to the What Matters podcast, wellspring of inspiration from the heartbeat of a regenerative economy. An economy that puts itself in service to life. What Matters is an emerging global initiative uniting impact creators from technologies, capital, and humanities to bridge dividing gaps and create an intentional human impact on the regenerative economy. At What Matters, we reclaim humanity as the driving force to make this impact happen. I'm Nicole Bastien, founder of What Matters and host for this podcast journey. We capture real-life conversations with those challenging the norm and where the audience can chime in at any time. I promise no scripts, no filters, just authentic experiences and raw insights from pioneers shaping a better world. If you want to share your perspective too, well then please join one of our next live conversations and visit us at humanitywhatmatters.com. And now, let's meet my guest. My guest of today. You are a serial entrepreneur and an advocate for regenerative entrepreneurship. And you also serve as the publisher of Solarpunk, which is a newsletter I adore very much, and where you dive into an economic and mental paradigm shift. So I really, really love the way you put the words and you love and shift and switch perspectives. And the other thing I know about you too is that you are kind of embodying punk. You are a punk. in a kind of this kind of philosophy to you, like, you know, meaning questioning the status quo, rattling the cage, and really asking all those deep going questions if the existing system is the only way we know, or even there is something we can make it better in the way. So that brought us together. This is what I adore about you, and that's what I so much appreciate about you. So please welcome all of you, Stefan Fiedler Alvarado, my much appreciated thought companion and kind of punk co-creator for today. So you're from Costa Rica and now currently located in Czech Republic. Welcome, Stefan, and thank you so much for being in this space with me.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It's a pleasure to be here with you, with so many of our community members here. So this is going to be an absolutely fascinating conversation. I can already start picking up on what you're saying, but before I get into that, I don't know, I'll pass the ball on to you and let you guide the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, there's really one simple question I want to start, really, and I'm really curious what you have to say. And you know me, I love to prepare the ground very well, because from there we can just like reach different heights. So, and when we talk about entrepreneurship, the one I'm very, very curious about is, and it's a very simple question, what does entrepreneurship actually mean to you? And I do not mean in terms of regeneration or in terms of established economy. What does entrepreneurship mean to you? Or in other words, how do you actually recognize an entrepreneur?
I recognize an entrepreneur personally in very much the same way that I recognize a true artist. I believe that entrepreneurship can only be boiled down in its essence to what it means etymologically. And when you look at where that word comes from, it means somebody who undertakes. And so, sure, you know, the word entrepreneurship has, like many other beautiful concepts, you know, sort of been mangled over time. It's been, you know, co-opted into sort of like a type of, if you will, lifestyle that, you know, has you running your own business and, you know, selling whatever kind of product so you can live this sort of best life. And I get that, but for me, what entrepreneurship really means is much closer to what artists do. And that means looking at the world, understanding that context, seeing what is needed from that context, and creating a vessel, uh, call it a company, call it a collective, you know, call it a studio, that brings people together to explore and push the envelope further regarding the questions that arise out of those specific contexts. And that oftentimes gets, I guess, brushed under the rug when we talk about entrepreneurship in the contemporary, situation. Right, we live in a system that is so deeply moved and driven by greed, and so entrepreneurship has sort of been conflated as this unique way to get rich, and live the famous lives of entrepreneurs. We have so many people in our society that call themselves entrepreneurs, and the fame that comes with that becomes very attractive. But ultimately, um, and I know there's people in the audience that resonate with this. I feel like, in my view, the true entrepreneurs there are much closer to, artists and scientists. Nikola Tesla. If people like him, right, who've dedicated their entire lives to pushing the envelope of what humanity is capable of doing, um, often to the point that it degrades their degenerates their being. It is punishing, it is difficult, but it does elevate humanity in that regard. And therefore entrepreneurship in that regard, um, even though we're talking about maybe one entrepreneur that is trying to push the envelope, first of all, is there's never one person, right? There's always others behind
Right.
the scenes. Need that community behind people, um, that ultimately serve humanity, and they are in service of humanity.
I love that very much. I mean, there's, you already opened so many others. We're going to go down to them, of course, and get to them. Let me add my perspective being I was corporate for the longest time of my life, and I am
Yeah.
self-employed. Like, I'm an entrepreneur for almost 4 years now. So I'm full-time entrepreneur. I always had my, as they say, side hustles in Kenya, as I
Yeah.
learned. So it means like being a side entrepreneur. And to me, it is the most beautiful way expressing own talents and
Mm-hmm.
own potential in a way that I never could done in a corporate world, because I always had to
Mm-hmm.
fit in. And being an entrepreneur means every day is different, even though you're really like focusing on your business and the things, but it's up to you to write the next iteration. It's up to you to make a decision whether or not. It's up to you to do this or that, and the way you want to express it. And of course, there are people among entrepreneurs, they go with all the frameworks. Let's say on Monday I do lean startup, on Tuesday I do a business model canvas, all the things and the bullshit I'm saying here.
Yeah.
And then there are people like me, for example, and I know you too, and many in our audience, I bet they're the same. We really love to really go with the core, and that resonates a lot. What you said is like what an artist do. And an artist does not go with the framework. An artist wants to express themselves in a way that's just coming from their core. So is that what you meant?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it very much has a lot to do, as you said, with exploring that from the point of view, your authentic point of view, and from whatever reality you're experiencing. And one quote that I hold very dear to my heart, that is, to me, it wasn't even said, from the point of view of an entrepreneur, but or at least not in the traditional sense, but rather an author. His name is Antonio Machado, a Spanish poet, from the generation 98, and he said that, this is a pretty popular quote, so maybe you're familiar with this, but he said, "Walker, there is no way. The way is made by walking." And I think that that is one of the defining traits of an entrepreneur. We walk paths that either scarcely have been walked or haven't been walked at all by others. But it's like going into the jungle with your machete and trying to make a trail for the first time, so that you can open up those new ways for people to walk up the mountain and enjoy that, and live that reality. And they don't have to, be the ones that are building the path, but that is the job of the entrepreneur, the trailblazers, the pioneers, these people that are at the very fringes, at the very edges of what humanity is up to, and pushing the envelope further, and ideally, right, for the betterment, of course, of humanity, but for all life on this planet.
Beautiful. And I mean, you and I, we had so many conversations about so many other things. And what I really love and adore about you is that we do not keep ourselves busy with, like, the pre-words, the foreword. We're always going right into that. And let me really do that and keep to our tradition here between you and me. Our focus today is radical entrepreneurship. So we found a little more definition of entrepreneurship, and let's get into what radical actually means. So back to the roots, of course, in the Latin meaning. And not like what other people say. Radical is like, you take, like, I don't know, the big knife.
Extremism.
Yes, exactly. You take the big knife and you cut down everything. Radical really means you are anchored into something. And in terms of regenerative economy and entrepreneurship, I was really curious and wondering how you see that. What does radical mean to you, radical entrepreneurship, actually?
Yeah, so I mean, in our conversation, sort of like where this came about, right? I was invited by my university to give a series of lectures on some of the lines of work that I'm doing, in my consulting work and beyond. And I was trying to find a common thread to unify all these different topics, regarding new business models, new forms of building businesses, new purposes for the economy, new roles for people in the economy. And what I came up across was the fact that what we're what I was really trying to convey to these students is that when it comes down to it, if we want, as we're moving forward into the future and becoming entrepreneurs, we have to really, on the one hand, think in systems, because that's where the illnesses of our society are most manifest. And therefore, the solutions are only they can only be found when we're thinking of uh, the economy, politics, society, and systems. And so, what radical entrepreneurship means to me, again, just boils down to the etymological roots, right? It's an undertaking, entrepreneurship, of the root causes of those radical facets, or problems, and where in those problems at the root lie those radical solutions, right? So what that means, for example, to me is, um, sure, when we talk about climate change and we need to, be able to decrease our carbon emissions significantly, not just carbon emissions, all these other greenhouse gases, um, but climate change in and of itself isn't the problem, right?
Right?
it's
Absolutely.
it's and it's not even humanity that is the problem, right? And I might go on a little tangent here, but so bear with me as I make my point, because uh, that is something that really bugs me when people say that humans are the problem. And this is super dangerous for many reasons. And I mean, we see it in the language, right? So we talk about this era of time, geologically speaking, being the Anthropocene, right? The time of man. And I mean, not only is this, sexist and misogynistic, but it's wrong, I think, in terms of if we want to really understand what is driving the degree of human impact that is able to, give scientists the evidence foundation to say, oh, this period of time is the Anthropocene. It's not that, I think, and I forget right now who it was that said this, but it was an artist, an environmental artist, and what she was saying is that this isn't so much the Anthropocene as it is the Capitalocene. And so it's the time of capitalism that is making us do all live the way that we are living in on planet Earth. And so, uh, going back to the carbon capture, right? So the problem isn't the carbon in and of itself. The problem isn't even humanity. The problem isn't climate change. The problem is the the behavior that the economic system that we are within is leading us to practice and engage with, right? And so when we're talking about, if we look at, say, carbon capture, as yeah, a very innovative technology that's very interesting and has some promise. it's obviously not a scalable solution. We don't have time for that. And I wouldn't call the development of a technology like carbon capture some outcome of a radical entrepreneurial venture. Why? Simply because that's not going to the root cause. If you want to have some like some radical entrepreneurial venture with a radically, radical solution oriented business model, then let's look at human behavior. Then let's look at the things within the current system of capitalism and find what is it within there that is leading us to have to deal with the symptoms that are climate change and biodiversity loss and ocean acidification, and all these tipping points being met.
Amazing. But it really, it brings me to one really point. I mean, it's so easy to point the finger, not that you did, I'm just saying, it's so easy to point the finger on the different, like, yeah, it's the capitalism, it's this and that. But the one thing, the truth is too, and it's an undeniable truth to me, it's humans, it's us. They make those systems, and it's us to keep them going. So the question I have is, what is it actually that makes us keep it going in a dysfunctional way?
Absolutely, and that is, I believe, where worlds meet, in the sense that, and I'll go on a little tangent as well here, just to make my point, and so the audience can understand where I'm coming from. So, for those that don't know, not only was Abya Yala, or the Americas. Abya Yala is the Kuna native language or way of addressing the entirety of the Americas. In Northern America, right, we talk about Turtle Island, but Abya Yala. And so, when the colonizers arrived, not only had there been civilization thriving there for thousands of years, but there was at the time a highly sophisticated democratic civilization in North America. And I'm talking here about the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois Confederacy. And for those who don't know, that wasn't the case always. There was a time before that, hundreds, maybe a couple thousand years before that, where the indigenous nations of North America were, warring nations. They were in conflict. And so the story goes that at some point, some figure, uh, and this isn't my story as well. I'm just here trying to represent, our common history as humanity. But some figure known as, in their tradition, as peacemaker, um, went around the nations, and instead of talking war, talked peace. And so, at least from whom I heard this, and if you want to look this up, the audience later, Oren Lyons, Orenlyons, faith keeper of the Turtle Clan, is where I heard it from, discussed how this peacekeeper figure was issuing new instructions for those nations. And the instructions were very simple. The instructions were, be grateful and respect. And why? Because the instruction was meant to build peace. And what we see in our society is not an instruction of peace. What we see in our society is an instruction of greed and war, right? This is why the profit motive is so powerful. It supersedes so many other valuable things. And so when we talk about, what really is the cause, it has to do with our worldview, with what we value in Western quote unquote democratic society. And we can also get into why it's a quote unquote democratic society, not like a true democratic society. I see that Anand is also on the stage, but I would also love to pass it on to him.
Hi, good evening, Stephen. Good evening, Nicole.
Hi.
Hey. So this point about Stephen spoke about something greed. suddenly it just got my mind running, and but I'd just like to share a few thoughts. Now, this thing about greed, the Greek philosophy is all about, if you start thinking about why do nation states do what they do. So the words of Thucydides come to my mind, wherein he said that nations go to war, nations carry out actions based on phobos, phobos, doxa. So in Greek language, in English, if translated, it amounts to fear, honor, and self-interest. Now I'm coming to a point here. If you come to think of it, and if you look around, you would realize that as on date, the world we are living in, wherein there's a sense of stabilized volatility that exists. So, like, be it China West decoupling, swing states at the fore, techno nationalism happening, in the entire ambit of it all, there are nations which have to carry out policy trade-offs. Now, when I say policy trade-offs, primarily, if you see, for economy to sustain, they need growth. And for that growth, there are certain actions that are required that probably may not be constructive enough as far as climate change is concerned. Right? So that policy trade-offs nations have to carry out. Like, case in point, there were certain solutions of yesterday that were taken out. Case in point, plastic. Plastic was the answer to the fact that tree cutting would end, and there'll be conservation and there'll be forest getting conserved. But the solutions of yesterday became problems of today. So the point I'm trying to come to is that when it comes to regenerative economy, possibly the point which Stephen had alluded upon, wherein he spoke about we need to understand human behavior. Maybe there is a case in point that we need to go beyond that and try and search for solutions which are more sustainable. Try and come up with entrepreneurial innovations wherein we have sustainability in not just actions, not just cause, but also in terms of effects and outcomes. So these were certain figments of imaginations, but I just thought that I'd share.
Thank you so much for contributing. It also brings me to the point, Stefan. I mean, creating solutions that are more sustainable also means I have to have the ability to look and act and approach beyond silos. And creating silos is one of the main diseases of our entrepreneurial era, to say so, where we come from. Like, you being an expert in something, and this is weaving through all the conversations I've been having since I don't know how many months, since fall last year. It always comes down to that, that in order to be an expert, you have to exclude certain things. You create a tunnel view, you create silos again, even in the region space. And I see that again and again. And that's also the pitfall for entrepreneurship and for regenerative entrepreneurship. So I want to bring that and weave that with what Anand said, like creating more sustainable solutions. So what is your experience? How do you see that? What's your perspective on that in terms of radical entrepreneurship? How we are able to create better solutions, even though we're coming from, I don't want to say a shitty place, because shit can also be a fertilizer. So
Yeah. That's a great analogy. Yeah. I think it really does have to do with what we value, and I'm in alignment with what you, Nicole, and Anand said. Um, my piece on that is, again, I don't think solutions can ever be as sustainable as they ought to be, as long as we are thinking of them in terms of solutions for people only, for humans only. So we really, like, I feel the call here is to, okay, if we're going to innovate, let's do that thinking of all life and all living creatures. And I know that seems like maybe perhaps a little bit daunting, but that is the way that life is, right? I mean, humans are just one organism in this massive complex web of life. When the pollinators are in decline and in heading towards extinction, so is humanity, right? Recognizing those relationships is extremely important, and I think it very much has to do in that regard for like long-term sustainable solutions to be had, like two things need to happen. And again, I'll go back really quickly to illustrate my point with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, because when the Brits were in the colonies, they had this fight with their king because of taxation and other stuff.
Right.
So they wanted to, go on with the War of Revolution and so on. But they were having a lot of issues because the king was very powerful and had a lot of money, and these colonies weren't, and they depended on him. And so they looked to the Native Americans for support and advice. And what the Native Americans said was, first of all, well, we're not going to take part in this conflict. This is you and your dad that have an issue, so you go deal with it. But second, have you considered uniting? And it's recorded in the history of the United States that the idea for making the United States of America came from that piece of advice from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And so that on the one hand, and on the other hand, as I said, they already had, a democratic confederacy where two things, so many of the democratic principles of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy became part of the United States Constitution, with two very notable exceptions. One, that all decisions ought to be made considering the effects of those decisions 7 generations down the line, and the role, the executive decision-making role of women in that. And that a big factor in making those decisions were the opinions of the women in power, the female leadership. And those two things were quintessential for upholding that system of democracy for the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, but they were omitted in the creation of the United States. So how do we create those sustainable solutions? We have to change our values, because we have to start thinking way longer term. And again, I don't think that this is like sure, there's like some issues with like psychology, right? If like the tiger is gonna eat you right now, it's kind of difficult to think about what you're gonna be doing in a week's time. I get that, but when the tiger is not eating you and you can plan ahead, plan way ahead. And as a collective, as a society, we can create the conditions for that to be the case, especially when we live in more community-oriented societies, and ultimately recognize how critically important all living beings are, and generate solutions using life-centered design principles.
Right. Going back into those times, all those leaders were married to women, and then they came home, and then the woman was waiting for them and said, "What did I already hear? So you did not take that in consideration." So it's the way I envision that. So there was a strong woman behind them, but what actually, it sounds like a stupid remark here, but it really brings me to something. We do need, we come to that over and over and over again. We do need those spaces where we have way more diversity, way more different aspects. And I do not talk only about gender, not talk only about race. I really talk about age. I talk about culture, all the things that we get. So the more diverse, the better. And that's also something. You think you're diverse, and then you realize you're actually not. So you do really have to have someone in the realm, which was, what's the English word? The guy to the king, not the joker, but you know what I mean, like
Jester.
Yes, thank you, the jester, who always there to ask the weird questions and remark that, and we have to come back to that, and we have to go back to that, especially in terms of entrepreneurship and creating those spaces where this can happen. And some of us do. Some have like the pleasure of having those friends and having all those networks. They really seek for those networks, but some not. They really feel way more comfortable creating those bubbles because it just feels so good. If someone says, "Yes, dude, you're so right. You should do it exactly that. Create the next unicorn. Go for the big exit." So that's the thing. Donna, please open your mic, unmute yourself, and please us with your beautiful voice.
Nice to see you, Stefan, and to meet you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Good to be here. partly I'm up here because of Stefan, because we've been together in a few other spaces. I'm just going to build on the title and the theme around radical entrepreneurship and the roots.
Yes.
And I think what we're speaking to here, all of us, is the need to reframe just about everything, the way that we think about everything, and kind of strip things back and like kind of get underneath the layers of what we mean by some of these words that have become, commonplace, but we really do need some of the deeper meanings around this. And what I'm hearing from both of you at some level is a retrospective honoring of the roots that are already here and that have always been here around life-affirming regenerative economy, and forward-facing, given the order of change and complexity and the overlapping kind of issues that we're facing, the need for some very different ways of fostering and nurturing, birthing regenerative economies and ecosystems in our world. And we know that this is already underway at some level. There's way more happening than what any one of us can see. And at the same time, we all feel this urgency, this impatience, and deep concern about what we're observing, and looking for ways, and there's, to join up and to not go beyond convergence to, I think what it was Graham and I that discussed this, confluence, where we bring these things together in real, grounded ecosystems, entrepreneurship, meaning all kinds of things in terms of business, government, and civil society coming together in place-sourced communities where we start doing, the work that we do in our lives, adding more real value to everything that we're doing every day, and bringing all the knowledge and capability that already exists together to start to do the things, in a more mindful way that bring about the kinds of changes that we're all talking about. I know I could ramble on, and I don't want to do that. I'm just wanting to hear both of you speak a little bit more to some of the threads, some of the things you're observing that are beginning to make more progress in this direction. It gets us beyond these kind of spaces where we're talking about it to actually grounding it, because I think many of us are working on some real initiatives around that. So I'll stop. Thanks.
Love it. Thank you so much,
Brilliant.
Donna. Stefan, you want to go first and then me, or how you want to do it? Just go.
I was even going to say that maybe we can also hear what Pankaj and Danielle have to say.
Yeah, well, then we do that and we wrap that up. Pankaj, please, you first, and then I hope, Danielle, that this time
nice.
it's going to work, right?
Yeah, I unmuted last time actually. It's difficult to find an unmute button. So my question is, when we talk about the regenerative economy, so can we transform our existing capitalism-based economy in corporates leans towards the sustainable? Because the capitalism is basically the profit and growth-based economy, and they are much more concerns about the profit and their what you can say, interest to the particular directors or the group of them. So can we transform the existing capitalism-based business towards the sustainable? Because without what I feel that capitalism is the exploitative, it's a degenerative economic model. Yeah, it's not regenerative. So how we can change the capitalism-based economy towards to the regenerative economy, which is more sustainable and life-supporting?
Brilliant.
That a
Amazing.
lot. Thank you. Danielle, please.
Hello.
Hello. Took you a while.
It just every time you turned me on, everything would stop and I couldn't hear anything. I was like,
I'm very sorry.
so I've gone to I've gone to a third device. I'm like,
Okay.
First of all, I really appreciate putting the time aside to create this conversation.
Thank you.
I am delighted to know in my heart to hear more of the conversation happening more often. I'm very inspired by the questions, especially the difficult ones we don't have answers to. I love those two. They just keep me up at night and I love them.
Yeah.
The comment from Anand was beautiful. And Stefan, what you talk about, the ancient wisdoms of those that came before us and the 7 generations, this is the work that has been transformative in my own life, going from a highly intellectual business analyst to a deeply immersed in the natural world shaman. And it's been quite a, most of the time, uncomfortable thing.
Yeah.
And I think I have at least some directions that I would like to point to around where the answers might lie.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done things like zero waste products or zero waste services or a sustainable service model as a business. And every single time I run the experiment and I push it to infinity, like to go beyond a couple of generations, it fails. And what I've realized is that the container we hold the product in, the container, like the way we organize, matters the most. And at the root of that question is, who are we? And a lot of what I learned around that question came from the Maori culture where I lived in New Zealand for 30 years, because they had a 4th pillar of health. And they had body, mind, spirit, which is kind of everywhere else around the world where I had studied ancient practices and ancient wisdoms. But this was the first one where I came across what they call social health. So your relationships define your health.
Yeah.
And the thing that I came to realize through my own meditations is that the first relationship is breath, and that we are the one breath we share. And from there on, it unfolds. And down the line, there is the human relationships, and it's beautiful. It's just, I love what you said before about, hey, we are the natural world. Everything we eat, everything we drink, everything we breathe comes from the world outside of us, or nature, the externality. So I've found a way of potentially articulating how do we architect the structure of the organization, where in my mind, you give more than half of the shareholding, quotation marks, to nature, and then we humans hold the other half. And this kind of doubling for nature allows us to just kind of leave fertile ground behind. You can always pay things forward. You can keep leaving behind more. And it honors the one wisdom, because I have 5 kids. It's like we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And when I sit with that, it's like, how much of our, not rubbish, but how much of our mess are we going to leave behind for them to clean before they get to live their life? And I see a lot of beautiful things in this space around sustainability and regeneration. I rarely see people taking enough of a step back to go, hey, we live on one very contained sphere called the earth. So at the highest level, the way we organize feels like cooperative or something of that structure would be quite powerful for us. And then like acknowledging the relationships with our external world, the world of plants and animals and like rivers and all that, just all of it, and honoring those relationships by bringing into our business relationships space, or making space in our business relationships for those aspects of ourselves. Because as much as we are individuals, we are also everything else.
Yeah.
Just we're rarely aware of that we are both. So I really would love people to consider, and it's a really difficult thing to think about, because so much of what you said before about entrepreneurship, so much is glorified. And, I own 80%. I'm like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I just don't care, because like, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And really, you don't. You think you do, and it's beautiful in your mind, and I love that you believe that. And you're so far away from the reality, or your model of reality in your mind is disjointed from the actual world you live in, and that is like a mental health disease. And it's all good. It's fine. We're all going through everything we need to go through to open ourselves up to it. It's just that, yeah. And it's difficult because when that first idea came to me, I was like, okay, so nature is a stakeholder. This lady, Donna, did a beautiful video. I was like, that's not enough. I've been an analyst in the corporate world. If you're a stakeholder, I can invite you in or not. I can listen to you or not. I can present your case or not. I get to decide. So stakeholder means nothing. And the only people that really mattered was shareholder. I'll say, well, if nature matters to us, give it the majority of the shareholding. Like, how do you mean it? In the legal world we live in, how do you give it meaning? How do you articulate, hey, this is the majority of our relationship? We live within this other world. We're not the world. Now, we have guardianship, we have custodianship, we have caretaking too, that we have responsibilities for. Because we, the human creature, the man becoming, like, what is our work? Man, the maker of meaning, man, the maker of, like, we're the only creature on this planet that can actually design, architect, and build its environment.
And I
And
do, yeah. No, I do see.
Yeah.
And I do see, especially in the actually in all realms and in terms of economy, that the action reveals the state of consciousness and the state really, if a person is just repeating knowledge or a person really understood what it is about. So thank you for your contribution, Danielle. We have a lot, Stefan, we got a lot of food, I'd say, to really ponder and get into that, right? So let's do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if I may, then I'll try to address first Pankaj's point. So can we transform the contemporary economy basically to a regenerative economy? So my honest answer with that is flat no. There's no way. What we can do, however, is to take the parts of the contemporary economy, the tools of the contemporary economy, that is to say, business structures, the supply chain, the way that we organize ourselves in some respects, and compost that essentially to build a regenerative economy, which is to say there has to be an onboarding process. And so what that means has a lot to do with what Daniel was just saying, right? Like, what is this container that we organize ourselves in? And that being a root of the problems, right? So, like the contemporary, organizational model, business model form, the corporation or the limited liability company. The roots of that come from colonialism. Like the one of the oldest companies that was basically at the time a corporation was the East India Company, right? And the British East India Company, right, which was chartered between merchants and the Crown of England to go and extract from India, and that was made in a way that okay, the investors, those merchants, the Crown could therefore be the leaders of that company, enjoy the most wealth, and access further funds. Now, what that means is that today's businesses are built off of that legacy and they're repeating those patterns. So what do we need to do? We need to build businesses differently. And that's what we do at Evolute 6, right? So with our Fair Shares Commons design methodology, we build multi-stakeholder organizations that are able, amongst many other things, to be that container for all these different types of relevant material stakeholders and issue them shares, therefore making them shareholders, as you were saying, because it's true. Like, unless stakeholders have been systemically provided with the power to make decisions and affect decisions and enjoy a share of the wealth, then like they're their input is like null. It reminds me, like a friend of mine was saying, "Hey, Stefan, I'm working in this project with the World Economic Forum. They have a project called Red Plus, and it's basically what we're working on is to support the development of indigenous people by providing them with technology." And I was like, "Great, okay. So how are you going to do that?" And she's like, "Oh, we're going to put all these people at the in these tribes in WhatsApp groups where they'll be able to talk about what they want and what they need." And I was
Great.
like, "Okay, but does that guarantee that they're going to, be listened and that their opinions are going to be accounted for?" And she was like, "Well, not really." And I'm like, "Exactly. That's precisely the problem. You can virtue signal all you want, but unless you actually distribute power to those that need to have it to generate those sustainable ways of living, of doing economics, of doing business, then you're going nowhere." And the power question is extremely difficult, right? Um, Partially as well because we live in such a competitive oriented worldview. And so here I go to Donna's point of like, okay, how do we converge these past ways of living and these future ways of birthing regenerative economies in the same way that nature has done it, right? In ecosystems, right? I mean, it's not so much anymore about like portfolios or like communities or nation states. It's really taking the way of organizing that nature has perfected, that is to say ecosystems, that bring together those players in a way that, yes, promotes competition and yes, promotes collaboration, but just like Darwin found, and through the insights of many other evolutionary biologists since then have found, that the best way to compete is to outcompete by collaborating, right? And until we can get that really deeply in our head and we realize that, and this is part of the ancestral wisdom, that until we share, whether it's power, resources, call it land, call it money, then, we're going nowhere. And again, we need that value change to happen. So that's my piece. What do you think, Nicole?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. I took quite some notes, and I don't know, the page is already full here, so I want to really try to keep it to the essence. Let me start with what Pankaj said about the growth-oriented economy. To me, it's not the problem is not the growth. In nature, growth is about exactly that. There is the seed, there is the sapling, there is the plant, there is the tree, and the only purpose is bringing out the most beautiful being that it is meant to be. So it's all about growth. But what we humans do not take in consideration anymore is that it has to die too. And especially in our businesses. We do not want to see things die because to us it means it's close to be extinct. Mm-hmm. And that is such a deep, deep fear we all carry that we cannot even bear to say someone, I don't have even a purpose, because purpose became also like the synonym for, oh, I have value, I have a place in this world. So again, the problem for me is not the growth in the economy. The problem is that we are disconnected to natural cycles of what we say regeneration of life. So you grow, but you also die. You shrink and you expand. And that's just a normal thing. You have times where you really need to go in your energetic hibernation to ponder and to contemplate. And then the next phase, the next iteration, you buzz out in the vast creativity what came to your being. And I don't mean it that in an esoteric or spiritual way. It's a normal way to do. I call that a genius. I call that the brilliance. And everyone who is gathered here today and beyond knows those phases, the flows, we call that. When we just like, I don't know what came into me. I cannot stop. I'm just creating. And that brings me to entrepreneurship again. To me, the entrepreneurship is really the ultimate, as I said at the beginning, expression of own talents, of creativity and creation. And this is what we have to keep in mind, because we always say, oh, there's this framework, there's this tool, and then we depend on this tool, we depend on this framework, we want the next blueprint. But as a regenerative entrepreneur, by design, we do not operate in ways where a blueprint exists. Nature doesn't know a blueprint, it just takes over what's there. We really have to take in consideration that it's operating on the fringes, operating on those edges means, which is we have to trust our gut feeling, we have to trust our ability to create. And you said it beautifully, it takes the right ecosystem, and an entrepreneur has to be able to build ecosystems. That is for me radical entrepreneurship. That is for me regenerative entrepreneurship, having the ability and the capacity to build ecosystems. And I want to even spin it further. An ecosystem itself is also quite isolated. What it takes to combine and connect one ecosystem to the other, and who was the last conversation I had at Love at Work, I also said that it also needs those transition zones between one ecosystem and the other. It's called ecotone in biology, in ecology actually. And these ecotones, they are so crucial for exchanging information and connecting one ecosystem to the other. This is actually where it's really happening, where the one ecosystem knows, oh, wait a minute, there's something going on over there. Oh, we have to be careful. So we have to produce more of that, or we have to reduce on this or that. So that's something that is really, that is for me something we have to foster in our way of doing entrepreneurship. So, and then it was also about, so how can we actually bring it out? So how can we create those spaces? Well, I've been in the business world for 3 decades. And I learned the established business way and economy. I'm fluent in that. I don't want to repeat that, because my way is building up a way more regenerative future, a way more regenerative economy. And by the way you say it, you can already tell I do not believe in regeneration as an outcome or as an output. To say it's a way, for me, it's an outcome of something doing in a better way, of being in service to life as the ultimate definition of regeneration. But it also means it's nothing for the faint of heart. So everyone who is really dedicated to do and say, I want to be a different entrepreneur, I really want to put human values and environmental values at the forefront of my business. Right now, in this kind of economy we're sitting here, it's still nothing for the faint of heart, because people look at you as if you have a third eye. So you need to make sure that you have the right people around you. You and I, Stefan, we talked about that. People, they really cheer you. They are they're on a bandwagon and said, keep going, come on, keep going. You can do that. And also what Donna said, how can we create a space? I'm coming back to that. It's not about the system itself, like creating the system, because the system is created by us humans. It's about, we do have to have those leaders. We do have to have those entrepreneurs, like Stefan, you are one of them. And many of the people we are gathered today here, they really dare to do it differently. And they dare to speak up, they dare to show up. And by the way we do, we are a living example of that. Can things be different? And by that, people get affected because they see the radiance, they see our humanity. And right now, when AI is taking over everything and can even replace human voice, the real human voice and the real human being becomes more crucial. I dropped my mic here. So, Donna, getting back to stage. You want to say something to that, Stefan? I was showing my flow.
That's amazing. No, let's let Donna.
That's your Donna, hey Donna.
I will be brief because I know we're at the top of the hour, so I know time is always right here. And just want to say, really resonate with what you shared here, Nicole. And I want to pick up on something you said, Stefan, around we need to outcompete through collaboration. What I want to acknowledge is the tension that's there that we all need to hold. And I'm also concerned about that. I know there is competition. We live in a very noisy world where everybody is needing to somehow live in the world as it is today, for real. And at the same time, just as we, can learn from the Two Loops model or the Three Horizons model, to live into the future that we hold in our hearts today. My concern is this: we need way more collaboration to get these balance, and that's what I also hear from Nicole's voice. And so my concern is seeing a lot of collaboration washing. Frankly, people have
Yeah.
watched up. They know that, well, we need to collaborate, so we're going to start to sound like we're really collaborating. Look at us; we're doing the good things. We're better than everybody. And at some level, that's the message that comes through, and the kind of radical collaboration that we really need, where it doesn't matter who started it. We need to come together around some of these things. So I'll stop there because there's something really important around holding this tension and finding some ways to be truly collaborative, which isn't slipping down the slippery slope of the old paradigm, which frankly we're seeing a lot of as well, even among those who fervently are trying to birth a new paradigm. If you know what I'm talking about here, there's some real tension and paradox in all of this. Thanks.
I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. And let's do it also. Let's be at our final round, Stefan. Go.
Okay. I'll keep it brief though, because I've just recently had that conversation or something related to that, and to be honest, it's a difficult one, and I don't have the answers to that. Because even though us who are trying to birth this new economy, and we're still living in a paradigm that is dominated by, if you will, like personality politics, ego and the like, and it's a tough one. I haven't found an answer in terms of how can we radically collaborate at the most fundamental level, but I do think that the answer lies somewhere around the concept of service and being of service, and to something rather larger than ourselves, whether it's human or not. And that has to do with viewing, I think, the world in this through this relational lens, and understanding that it is those relationships that make us who we are, that keep us going, that make life worth living. And in being in service to those relationships, human and non-human, also like the purpose question gets a little bit answered there. But yeah, but like the method, if you ask me for methodologies or if you ask me for a framework, I'm a bit amiss, and I think, yeah, cultures in the past have probably figured that out much better than we have. And again, that's where the unlearning has to happen very, very powerfully at a very, very deep level. And again, we need to, like, platforms like this. We also, and I would, like, being able to represent the voices of those that have so much wisdom but are generally unheard. I think that would also be, like, part of what radical collaboration means. Simply holding space, and that's a phrase that gets used a lot, but it's powerful, and it means a lot more than just virtue signaling. Oh, let's tokenize. No, it's, again, let's listen. Let's give people the space that need it to speak. Let's shut up, let's listen, and for it all to make sense and be worth it, let's hold whoever needs to be held accountable to account, whether it's ourselves, our peers, and the systems that we are a part of. Because without accountability, there's also very much that we can do until that happens.
Wonderful. Well, what came to my mind is we can only see so far as we can see right now. Or in other words, we always think in like the Mount Everest tour, like how are we going to reach the peak? How are we going to make it to the summit? And always forget that each destiny, to really address here some fortune cookie things, starts with the first step. But that's real, that's true in real life. I mean, it's really, really cool to have this question, to ponder, to lean into this question. Like Rilke says, fall in love with the question, and someday you really live into the answer. And for what we're doing here, there is no real answer. This is really step by step, and then dare to expand your own perspective, your own vision, questioning where you're standing. Really, like, is that it? Is that really the ultimate definition of diversity? Is this what we reached? This is real. Is that really the edge already we're here? And we will find out collectively that's not, it cannot be. So that's for me is the learning journey, and that's for me means radical entrepreneurship, being really in a different way this adventure, the undertaker in service to life. I think that is my Stefan. My goodness, I feel so brilliant right now, being the undertaker in service to life. So that would be that for me. So in that ways, I want to say thank you to all of you, and especially Stefan, to you. You really made my day. I took so many notes again. It was a pleasure having you here today. It was a pleasure all of you having here. So many regulars showing up to What Matters Live Conversation. And if you want to follow Stefan, please do so on LinkedIn, and also subscribe to his beautiful newsletter, the Solarpunk. Thank you for tuning into What Matters podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you want to stay connected and take an active part, please follow me and What Matters Initiative on LinkedIn for invitations. And we'd appreciate your support by liking, sharing, and visiting us at humanitywhatmatters.com. So stay tuned and be human. Bye-bye.